Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mayorkas, thank you for being here once again to endure the completely uncalled for, unwarranted personal attacks from my Republican colleagues. I want to get into some of what they have been saying because it's truly shocking that we are where we are. On the one hand, my colleague from Florida says that all Democrats want to do is throw money at the problem. Mr. Pfluger just said this is a policy issue, it's not a money issue. Okay. Is the Senate bipartisan bill that you worked on, along with the second most conservative Republican senator in the Senate, an independent and a Democrat, that was endorsed by Senate Republican leadership, a policy bill or an appropriations bill?
It is both, Congressman, it is both an appropriation bill and an immigration reform bill, and fixing what everyone agrees is a broken system. It would provide us with new legal authorities that are much needed and would really advance the security of the border.
And one of those critical revisions is in the asylum process. I know this is not under your purview, but do you have any sense of how many asylum applicants ultimately are granted asylum in this country?
Congressman, it of course depends on the demographics, but as a general rule, I believe it is approximately 20–25% ultimately receive asylum, but I would want to verify that statistic, and I probably shouldn't share it given my uncertainty.
Understood, and there are different numbers, but it takes at least 5 years and perhaps as many as 10 years for a case to be completely adjudicated. Is that right?
It takes many years until a case is finally adjudicated.
So let's just say, hypothetically, that we had an asylum processing system that could process any applications within 90 days, 6 months. Am I correct that that means that 75 to 80% of the people who apply for asylum would not get asylum and would be returned to their own country?
That would enable us to remove people far more quickly. You are correct, and that would make a sea change of a difference in our ability to enforce the southern border of the United States.
And is it your view that if that were the case, that there would not be an incentive for anyone who knows that he or she may not qualify for asylum to come to this country knowing that that person would be able to make an application to get a work authorization and stay here for at least 5 years to work? Is that correct?
That is, Congressman.
And that, of course, creates a tremendous incentive for people to come across the border. The problem is not our credible fear standard. The problem is not the policy of asylum. The problem is that we don't have the resources to process asylum applications as expeditiously as is necessary. So no one over here is talking about throwing money at the problem. We're talking about solving the problem. And in the Senate, they tried to solve the problem. They tried not just with appropriations, but with a policy bill. Unfortunately, the Republicans have put politics over our border security. They want chaos in order to win an election rather than to solve the problems. You don't have to take my word for it. Let's quote Donald Trump, who said that he sabotaged the bipartisan deal to secure the border because, quote, it made it much better for the opposing side, unquote, and that he had stated that he, quote, killed, unquote, the deal. Senator Lankford himself said that a top Republican told me that if I try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this election year, he will do whatever he can to destroy me. He said, I do not want you to solve this during the presidential election. There was a policy bill. There was a policy change that would have significantly addressed the problems at the border. And instead, You all on the other side of the aisle sabotaged it, where you baselessly impeached the secretary who's trying to solve our problems at the southern border because you want to win it. You want to win in November.
Gentleman's time has expired. Jackson Lee for her 5 minutes question. Go, I'm sorry. All right, we'll go with Mr. Ivey and the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fire away for 5 minutes.
Appreciate it. Mr. Mayorkas, thank you for being here today and for the work that you do. I've been listening to my colleagues on the other side talk about treading on the Constitution and a scar on our nation's soul, but it seems to me that the impeachment proceeding that was moved forward out of this committee was the true scar on the Constitution and really did tread on the Constitution. It's interesting to me, if we go back, I want to say the fix was in almost before you got into the job. There was an article of impeachment filed in August of 2021. I'm not even sure you'd finished unpacking entirely yet, but there was already a movement to remove you from office. Then we had the chairman, as the ranking member mentioned earlier, speaking to a group of donors and talking about this is going to be fun, that referencing the impeachment of you, and get the popcorn. And that was almost a year ago. And then we came to the actual hearings that were held here. I think there were two. Now, I had a little experience dealing with impeachment proceedings in the House previously, back in the 80s when I worked on the Judiciary Committee staff. We didn't remove anybody from office with two hearings. In fact, we gave people due process. They had a chance to present evidence and the like. And it was taken in a much more serious manner than this was. And then I got to say, we heard another one of my colleagues sort of try to reconstitute what the standard is for impeachment. The language is pretty plain on its face. Treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And there's been an effort to try and recalibrate that because there's no evidence of you committing treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So they lowered the bar. I want to read something briefly from one of your predecessors, Mike Chertoff, who was the Homeland Security Secretary under the Bush administration. He said, in referencing this, the effort to impeach you, he wrote this back in January, I can say with confidence that for all the investigating the House Committee on Homeland Security has done, they have failed to put forth evidence that meets the bar. That is why Republicans aren't seeking to hold Mr. Mayorkas to the Constitution's high crimes and misdemeanor standard for impeachment. They make the unsupported argument that he is derelict in his duty. And then with respect to that issue, the issue of trying to get something done, instead of continuing on with the theatrics of impeachment, former Secretary Chertoff says, I don't agree with every policy decision the Biden administration has made. There are aspects of immigration strategy that are worthy of debate. But House Republicans are ducking difficult policy work and hard-fought compromise. Impeachment is a diversion from fixing our broken immigration laws and giving DHS the resources needed to secure the border. Here today, we've discussed the bipartisan Senate bill that while we were moving forward with the effort to try and put together an impeachment proceeding against you, at least my Republican colleagues, you were working in the Senate, Senator Lankford and others, to try and put together an actual bipartisan bill to address the problems at the border. And that came forward. It was killed by House Republicans when former President Trump gave the word that he didn't want it to move forward. And we haven't had any work done on trying to find a bipartisan effort to address these concerns since that day. So we've got a lot of statements being made in here today about the problems at the border and the budgets and issues along those lines, and you've already addressed some of the budgetary issues. But I do want to say this. I think it's critical for the Senate. They're going to, after we're done with this, these theatrics will be over, and they'll march the articles of impeachment over to the Senate and ask the Senate to remove you from office after a trial. But I think the Senate's already made it clear that that's not going to happen, and it shouldn't. In fact, there shouldn't even be a trial over there because this is such an adulterated process here. And it's such a scar on the history of the Constitution. It's the first time in 150 plus years where there's been an effort to remove a cabinet member that's gone this far, and for good reason, the Senate should throw it out and make a statement that this is not the kind of impeachment proceedings that we expect from the House of Representatives. It certainly isn't what I expected when I got here. I saw different when I worked here in the 80s. I saw how it was supposed to be done. This is not how it was supposed to be done. And I did want to conclude on this note. Just a couple of members on the House Republican caucus, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but Ken Buck of Colorado, this isn't just an impeachment.
Gentleman's time has expired. Sorry, Mr. Ivey. I know the chairman has wanted to keep us on a tight schedule.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Lady from Georgia for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayorkas, we do not have a country without a secure border, and we cannot have a safe country. We cannot protect our own democracy without protecting our elections. That is a fact. The open border is the #1 issue across America in poll after poll, and that is exactly why this committee impeached you. Mr. Secretary, the Oversight Project released a bombshell report last night on your connection to the dark money NGO industrial complex of illegal immigration. I know you saw this from one of my colleagues just earlier. They found flyers throughout the Resource Center Matamoros refugee camp in Mexico telling illegal aliens, reminder to vote for President Biden when you are in the United States. We need another 4 years of his term to stay open. Eyewitnesses saw the flyers also being handed out to migrants who were using RCM for assistance in coming to the United States. In an audio recording, the founder of RCM, Gabby Zavala, by the way, we maybe should subpoena her to the committee, agreed that they need to help as many people as possible before President Trump gets reelected. RCM is an operation that houses functions for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which helps migrants enter the United States, and you're familiar with their work. We know that you served as a former board member of this group that funds illegal immigration. And they're very proud of you, Mr. Secretary. They congratulated you on your nomination. You worked as a board member of an NGO that is working in conjunction with other NGOs, which are not only financing the invasion of the country, but also telling illegal aliens to vote in the United States elections. They are telling illegal aliens, non-citizens, to come vote for Joe Biden. That's your boss. This is corruption at the deepest level. As a matter of fact, I would call it treason. It's treason because these people have declared war on our citizens by raping our women, our children, and murdering people. Like Laken Riley, you're familiar with her, right?
Congressman, our heart breaks.
Are you familiar with Laken Riley?
I am familiar with the case.
You should have deported her so that she could be alive today. Her parents would have appreciated that. And also Kayla Hamilton, who was brutally raped and murdered by a cartel member. Her mother came and spoke to us. She didn't deport him either. You let him in the country. You, Mr. Secretary, have allowed over 10 million illegals, probably higher than that, could be closer to 15 million, we don't know, to invade our country. You've allowed the cartels to make billions and billions. As a matter of fact, you're probably the best business partner they could ever have. They make all this money in human trafficking and drug trafficking at our border. You've allowed approximately 300 Americans to be murdered every single day from fentanyl that comes across our border. And now you're aiding NGOs to steal our elections through your budget. I demand proof of citizenships in our elections, and that is something every single member of Congress should care about. We don't need illegal aliens voting in our elections. We're supposed to be here talking about your budget, but we're talking about how money is being used to make sure people come into our country are able to get a Social Security number in which they can register to vote. And on that note, Mr. Mayorkas, I demand that Chuck Schumer holds your impeachment trial in the Senate, because that's exactly what we should be focused on right now.